My name is Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. History remembers me as the man who refused to surrender. A bulldog in a bow tie, waving a cigar while the world burned. It's not entirely inaccurate. But before I became a statue or a quote in a textbook, I was simply a man who liked words, whiskey, and winning arguments. In that order. I was born in Blenheim Palace in 1874. A grand beginning for a boy destined to cause trouble. My father was a politician of dazzling intellect and disastrous timing. My mother, an American beauty with more ambition than affection. They both had better things to do than raise me. Boarding school took care of that. There I discovered the British education system. Designed to produce soldiers, not thinkers. I was beaten, scolded, and told I'd never amount to anything. To their credit, they were half right. But I had one gift, words. Words could wound, inspire, or save a man from ruin. I learned early that in politics, as in war, victory often belongs to the one who speaks last. I joined the army not from patriotism, but boredom. Peace was dull, war had uniforms and applause. In Sudan, India, and South Africa, I learned two truths. That courage is mostly about not running away too soon. And that a good quote will outlive a good battle. I wrote my own war stories. Sent dispatches home. And watched my name creep into the newspapers. I was becoming famous. Always a dangerous condition for a young man with opinions. Politics came next, naturally. I switched parties twice, which my critics called hypocrisy and I called flexibility. The truth? I simply refused to sit still in the wrong room. When I warned Britain about Hitler, they laughed. They said I was obsessed with ghosts of the last war. So I sat in silence for years, collecting my speeches like grenades, waiting for the next explosion. Germany marched, Europe trembled. And suddenly, I wasn't mad anymore, just early. When Chamberlain resigned, the king summoned me to form a government. I remember the weight of that moment. Not pride, but a sort of calm terror. I told the nation, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Which was, regrettably, the full inventory. Those first nights in the war rooms felt endless. Maps covered the walls like open wounds. Red pins crawling across Europe. I smoked cigars until the air itself surrendered. Every decision meant lives. And every hour brought news of loss. Leadership, I discovered, is pretending you're not as frightened as everyone else. Then came Dunkirk. Our army cornered, the sea our only ally. A disaster turned miracle by courage and chaos. We didn't win, we escaped. But sometimes, escape is victory in disguise. When Parliament whispered of surrender, I gave them words instead of peace. We shall fight on the beaches. The speech that made me immortal. And utterly exhausted. I remember sitting down afterward, trembling. Thinking, dear God, please let them believe me. They did. And somehow, that was enough. Night after night. London burned under the Blitz. I visited bombed neighborhoods. Offered smiles, cigars, and absurd optimism. The people smiled back. Because when you've lost everything, defiance is all that's left to give. America joined after Pearl Harbor. Ah, the Americans. Always late to the party. But they do arrive with champagne and aircraft carriers. Roosevelt and I became allies. A most unlikely friendship. He with his calm, I with my chaos. He called me Winnie. I called him a very fine American edition of a Roman consul. Which, in my language, meant I liked him. Together we planned D-Day. The great return across the Channel. I was too old to fight. But I fought with words. And words, sometimes, are sharper than bayonets. When Paris was liberated, I cried. Not because we'd won, but because I finally believed we might deserve to. The war ended. The bells rang, the crowd sang. And the man who had saved Britain was voted out of office. It was inconvenient. Apparently, people prefer affordable housing to heroism. Democracy, a fine system, except when it applies to you. I spent my exile painting landscapes, writing my memoirs, and making peace with my black dog of depression. He was a loyal companion, always waiting, never cured. Still, I found solace in art and brandy. Clementine, my wife, found solace in ignoring me. She said I was impossible. I said that was my best quality. 5 years later, they voted me back in. I suspect nostalgia played a part. But the world had changed. Empires were dying, and America was the new empire in denial. Stalin had drawn his curtain of iron across Europe. I gave it the name, he gave it the reality. He had tanks, I had metaphors. History, I fear, remembers us both equally. I traveled, lectured, warned the West. Beware the comfort of peace, it dulls the mind faster than war. They applauded politely. Then they went back to building televisions. They say victory is sweet. It isn't. It tastes of ashes and sleepless nights. I see faces. The young, the brave. The ones who never saw the dawn of peace they bought with their blood. Every cigar I light still smells faintly of gunpowder. I often wonder, did I win the war? Or did the war simply choose me as its spokesman? History likes clean stories. Good versus evil. Heroes versus villains. But life is muddier. And the truth usually hides somewhere in between the speeches. If I had been born in another country, would I have fought for the other side? I'd like to think not. But certainty is the first casualty of experience. They gave me titles, honors, and a funeral plan before I'd even died. I preferred the company of paint and silence. Sometimes, late at night, I'd dream I was back in the war rooms, listening to the ticking clock. Only this time, it wasn't counting down to invasion. It was counting down to me. When I finally left politics, I didn't announce it. I simply stopped talking. For me, that was the hardest campaign of all. On my last day in Parliament, a reporter asked if I feared death. I told him, I am ready to meet my Maker. Whether my Maker is prepared for the great ordeal of meeting me is another matter. He laughed. So did I. But neither of us was joking. I died in 1965. London stood still. The Thames carried my coffin past the cranes. And the cranes bowed, as if the city itself had taken off its hat. They called it the end of an era. I thought it was just the end of a very long day. And as I drifted beyond the reach of empire, I hoped not that history would be kind, but that it would be honest. For honesty, unlike power, cannot be lost, only ignored. So if you remember me, remember not the speeches or the statues, but the silence between them. Remember the tired man who fought nightmares with words and fear with humor. I am Winston Churchill, and this was The Weight of Victory.